Welcome, everybody, to another LinkedIn Live. I am Steve Bishop, excited to be here today with you for another episode or whatever they call those things these days. But here to talk to you about something that nobody's talking about, or actually, maybe everyone's talking about. It's AI. AI isn't something that financial institutions need to prepare for someday. It's already in our institutions. Employees are using it, vendors are using it, technology providers are building it into the products financial institutions are already depending on. In some cases, leadership may not even know where or how it's being used. I dare say, maybe most cases. I've been an executive in community banking. I've worked at Jack Henry and Citibank. I spent much of my career at that intersection of banking and technology. It's a big part of why I wrote this. It's called Know Your Agent, or KYA, and I want to spend some time today explaining why I wrote it, what I believe AI means for financial institutions, and what bank leaders can start doing about it right now. One of the patterns I've seen throughout banking is that we can be very good at responding to risk once the consequences become obvious. Sometimes we don't get ahead of it. You think about the mortgage crisis and TARP, the industry experienced significant consequences, and then regulation, governance, controls, and oversight evolved in response. We've seen another version of that pattern with banking as a service or embedded finance. Industry moved quickly, and then came those significant problems, regulatory scrutiny, consent orders, situations involving companies like Synapse and Evolve. The point isn't that these situations are identical. The point is, the bank has often strengthened its governance after the risk becomes painfully visible. I don't want us to have the same pattern with AI. This time we have an opportunity to do something different. We can get ahead of it. There's another important difference with AI. It's not just risk management conversation. It has the potential to make our institutions significantly better. It makes employees more effective. It can help executives better understand what's happening inside their organization, and it can improve processes. It helps us make better informed decisions and can change how the work gets done. I don't think the question is, do we innovate or do we manage risk? We need to do both. We have an opportunity to build the governance while we're creating the value rather than waiting for something to go wrong first. That is a huge reason why I wrote Know Your Agent. I'm going to read you a short section from the beginning of the book because it explains where this thinking came from. The 8K I kept coming back to wasn't the one filed by a major institution. It was filed by a community bank, a small one whose names most readers wouldn't recognize. I read it twice. I knew people who could have written it. On May 7th, 2026, the institution disclosed an AI-related incident. An employee had been using an unauthorized public AI tool to do parts of the daily work, and customer information had ended up inside the tool's interactions. The public reporting around the filing suggests this had been going on for some period of time before the institution caught it. Like most workarounds, this one likely had a believable origin story. The internal tools were probably slower than the public assistant. The policy presumably said, don't do this. Whatever supervision was supposed to catch the workaround apparently didn't until disclosure became unavoidable. From everything I can read in the filing and the surrounding reporting, the institution wasn't hacked and no vendor was breached. It had what it described as a written AI policy. Employees had been told about it. None of that mattered enough to prevent the disclosure. The institution's exposure wasn't a system, it was a workflow. The filing was a self-report, and that word is what keeps me coming back to it. How many other institutions had the same kind of incident and didn't disclose it? How many have it happening right now and don't know? How many will only find out when a customer notice, when an examiner asks, or when the chat history surfaces somewhere it shouldn't have? Those questions don't have discipline behind them yet. Banking is built disciplines for everything else. KYC tells a financial institution who its customers are. KYB tells it who the business on the other side of the relationship are. AML tells it how to recognize money trying to launder itself through the institution. ESA tells it how to write down what it saw. Each of those started as a problem nobody's named. It became a regulatory expectation and eventually became a discipline that shaped how banking is done. Underwriting, supervision, vendor management, model risk management. Each was a similar build in a different shape. What ties them together is that they are disciplines. They have their own vocabulary, their own artifacts, their own examination history, their own way of failing and being corrected. Policies and tools sit inside each discipline. the way procedures and checklists sit inside KYC. An institution can pass KYC audit or fail one, and the discipline is what gets tested, not the policy. And it goes on and talks about how that relates to KYA and that whole governance around it. It's a big premise behind the book. And as I've talked with bankers about the book, I've noticed I keep getting versions of the same questions. What is an AI agent? Is it safe to use agents? How do we protect our data? How do we deal with hallucinations? What about the AI our vendors are using? And how do we govern all of this? I think maybe the most important question for a financial institution, when an examiner asks, what is our AI doing? Can we prove we're managing it responsibly? Those are the questions I want to answer. First, we have to recognize the current state. AI is already here. In the book, I discussed an incident involving an employee putting personal information into the LLM that ultimately became serious enough to result in public disclosure. It was the excerpt I just read. I don't want people to focus only on the disclosure. The disclosure isn't what created the risk. The underlying activity created the risk. Whether something eventually becomes public doesn't change the exposure that existed before anybody discovered it. When the bank leadership hears a story like that, I understand the instinctive response. Block it. Don't let employees use it. Shut down the access. Let's put another policy in place. But here's the problem. The barrier isn't a strategy. If people believe AI helps them do their jobs and you simply block the approved tools, you haven't necessarily eliminated the activity. You may have pushed it somewhere you have even less visibility, personal devices or personal accounts or tools the institution doesn't monitor. So I think we're asking the wrong question if we're asking, how do we stop AI from entering the bank? It's already here. The better question is, how do we understand it, govern it, and use it responsibly? There's another part of this conversation that I think financial institutions need to take very seriously. Your AI isn't the only AI you need to understand. Your vendors, fintech partners, core providers, your technology partners, all those vendors, they're adopting AI too. They're putting AI capabilities in products and services that may interact with your institution, employees, your processes, or your customer information. They're moving according to their tech roadmaps, not necessarily yours. Banks already understand third-party risk. We already understand vendor management. What's changing is the nature and speed of the technology we're managing. An AI-enabled system can evolve quickly. So KYI can't only mean what agents did we build. We also need to be asking what agents are acting on behalf of, interacting with, or touching our institution through third parties. What information can they access? What are they doing? What controls surround them? Who is accountable? That's a part of knowing your agent too. So what exactly is an AI agent? This is probably one of the simplest questions I get. I think sometimes the tech industry makes the answer unnecessarily complicated. Here's how I explain it. An AI agent is a digital employee. You think about a teller, think that person performs works and transactions on behalf of your institution. An agent can perform work on behalf of your institution digitally. Now, imagine hiring a new employee. Would you bring that person on a Monday morning, give them access to every system in the bank, give them all of your information, provide no training whatsoever, and say, go figure it out? Of course not. You onboard them, train them, you decide what they need to know, what systems they need access to, and what they're authorized to do. You also establish what they're prohibited from doing. And if somebody is responsible, who's responsible for supervising? So why should a digital employee be treated differently? If an agent's performing work for your institution, you need to understand, what does it know? What information does it have? What can it access? What is it authorized to do? How is it trained? What happened if it does something that's unexpected, and who's responsible for supervising it? And here's why I think this concept should make sense to bankers. We already have disciplines built around knowing the parties that interact with institutions. We have Know Your Customer, KYC, and KYB, Know Your Business. Now we're entering an environment where another actor can perform work on behalf of the institution. The actor just happens to be digital. So that is the need for Know Your Agent, KYA. The underlying principle shouldn't feel foreign to banking. It's only the actor that's changed. Our responsibility to understand and govern what's acting on behalf of the institution has not. The next question I hear is, Steve, is this safe? My answer is depends on whether you have a strategy. If you simply let AI loose in an institution without appropriate controls, you're going to create problems. There's also another mistake we need to avoid. Suppose you have an inefficient process, a process with bad information or poor controls. Put AI on top of it, doesn't magically repair the underlying process. What it does is makes that process move faster. And that's important because speed works in both directions. Strong process, AI can help you execute it at tremendous speed and scale. But a flawed process, AI scales that flaw. AI doesn't automatically fix a bad process. It can accelerate it though. That's why the foundation matters. People also ask me, what happens when AI hallucinates? We need to expect that AI can produce an answer that sounds extremely confident and still be wrong. It means the answer can't simply be trust the AI. Fortunately, banks already understand this concept. Think about the controls we use when humans perform similar work: review, dual control, approval thresholds, exception management, escalation. We need to bring that same thinking into AI. In some situation, that means a human review and agent's work. In others, we may have an agent checking the work of another agent and escalating exceptions to humans. When you hear agents governing agents, that can sound futuristic, but from a banking perspective, the concept isn't futuristic at all. It's another form of maker checker. The participants just happen to be digital. All of this brings me to what I believe is one of the most important principles in using AI successfully, and that is context drives everything. Excuse me. And I learned that the context, I learned it by using the technology myself. I have a podcast called Bourbon and Bass. And if you're in banking, when you hear Bass, you may think banking as a service. AI didn't automatically know my context. It interpreted Bass as a sound a sheep makes. So I can create a logo. There was a sheep in it. It's pretty funny, and we can laugh about it. We can fix the logo, but think about why it happened. The AI wasn't necessarily incapable of doing what I asked. It didn't understand the context. Inside a financial institution, a context mistake may have consequences far beyond putting the wrong animal on a logo. That's why I tell institutions, know your current state before you try to build your future state. Who are you? How do you operate? How do you communicate? How do you make decisions? And what's important to the institutions? What's important to its leadership? And what's your risk environment? Where are you trying to go? AI needs all of that context. So I've seen the impact of this firsthand. I worked with a bank CEO who was receiving information from his team, but who didn't always have a way of understanding the context necessary to interpret what he was hearing. People knew their individual areas and they were providing that information, but from his perspective, he's still determining, is this good or is it bad? Is it correct? And does it align with where I'm trying to take the institution? And how do I tell that story to my shareholders and investors and employees? So we built a digital version. We established context around how he thinks, how he communicates, how he views the organization, how he articulates his vision. Then we let AI help interpret the information in a way that resonated with him, to help him understand organizational performance and help him communicate his vision. That is fundamentally different from everybody gets a chatbot. We started by understanding the human and the institution. Then we applied the technology. Before you build the agent, build the context. When bankers ask me how to keep their data safe with AI, my answer comes back to two things: technology and governance. Understand where your information is, understand who and what can access it, organize it appropriately, establish permissions, create safeguards, monitor activity, make sure there's an escalation process. Don't assume you're covered simply because a major vendor says, we've added AI. Buying AI functionality isn't the same thing as having an AI strategy. I think this is critical. Your AI strategy cannot simply be your vendor's AI strategy. Your institution needs to understand itself first. Then you can decide which technology fits that strategy. For financial institutions, there's a simple way to think about whether your AI governance is mature enough. Imagine an examiner walking at your institution tomorrow and says, show me what your AI has been doing. What would you show them? Can you identify the agents operating inside, on, or on behalf of the institution? Can you show what an agent did? And can you show when it did it? what information or systems it accessed, can demonstrate what controls were applied, or when another agent checked its work, so when a human was alerted, who was accountable, does it have an audit trail? Because bankers understand something very important. Doing something responsibly and providing that you did it responsibly are not the same thing. We've dealt with this reality throughout banking. We're careful isn't documentation. We trust our people isn't an audit trail. AI is not any different. That's why auditability has to be part of AI governance from the beginning. And there's an old saying I use, and it's, when was the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. But when's the second best time? And that's today. And I believe that's where financial institutions are with AI. The technology is changing incredibly quickly. Models are leapfrogging one another. Capabilities that seemed impossible not long ago are becoming normal. Waiting for AI to stop changing isn't a strategy either. We need to build institutions capable of adapting as it changes. That means getting the foundation right now, because the goal isn't to bet everything on one LM. Those models will change. The best varies. Vendors will change. Technology just continues to change. But if you've established context, governance, controls, and strategy correctly, those things become the foundation that allow you to adapt. Your strategy belongs to the institution, not to an provider. Where my consulting work comes in. When I start working with an institution, we start with context. We do a deep dive into the institution. We build a digital version of that organization itself, and depending on the engagement, digital version of executives or department leaders. We need to understand, who are you, how you operate, how do you communicate, how do you make decisions, how are you perceived? All of those artifacts that you have to help define what's important to you, where you are today, and where you're trying to go. All those. From that work, I want the institution to develop three things: visibility, take an inventory to understand where AI is already present, what tools are employees using, what agents exist, what vendors are introducing AI, what is interacting with institution or customer information. You can't govern something that you don't know exists. The second thing is an institution-owned context foundation. Make sure that AI has the context it needs to understand, rather than locking your strategy into whichever model happens to be popular today. And the third one, monitoring, escalation, and evidence necessary to govern AI responsibly. You should be building towards an environment where, when the leadership, board, internal audit, or examiner asks what's happening, you can answer with evidence. So I wonder why I do this work. I've been a community bank executive, been at Jack Henry, I've been at Citibank, and right there on that line between banking and technology. And I think that combination matters. There are people who understand AI extremely well, but have never operated inside a financial institution. There are excellent bank leaders who understand banking deeply, but shouldn't be expected to become AI engineers. Financial institutions need to bridge those worlds. Excuse me. That's where I can help. And I understand the technology, but I also understand a bank operates in a regulated environment. I understand the questions the board asks, and I understand the importance of governance. I understand that eventually somebody may ask you to prove that what you're doing is controlled and responsible. I'm not there to take over the institution's strategy. I'm there to help leadership understand the technology, establish the foundation, navigate the decisions, and build a strategy they can own. Because ultimately, it has to be your institution's strategy. There are a few ways you can take the next step. The first is in the book, Know Your Agent. So I've laid out the thinking behind this framework and why I believe financial institutions need to start addressing it now. Then there's my consulting work. That's where we take these ideas and apply them specifically to your institution, your leadership, your current state, your context, risks, and that future state. And for the institutions that have the internal capability but need technology services to support them, that's where LLM Squared comes in. Different needs, they're built around the same underlying philosophy. For this live, though, I'm going to keep the next step simple. You can go to kyabook.com, learn about the book there. It's also on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So I want to talk about how this applies to your institution. Like it's all there. My consulting work, reach out. There's one thing I want you to take away from this conversation. It's that banking has an opportunity to approach AI differently. We don't have to wait for the major failure and then decide we need governance. We can build governance now. But at the same time, we can use AI to improve our institutions, better processes, better information, more capable employees, and better informed leadership. That is the opportunity. It requires us to be intentional, understand our current state, establish your context, and know where your AI is already operating. Govern your digital employees, make the activity auditable, build a foundation that can adapt as the technology changes. Most importantly, know your agent. Remember the tree. The best time to plant one was 20 years ago. Second best time is today. So if you want to know more, go to kyabook.com. You can know your agent there and learn about the framework your institution needs. Help develop its AI strategy and the governance you can learn about working with me there as well. I'd love to hear from you. Could your institution pass examiner test today? If an examiner asks you to show what your AI and AI agents are doing, could you do it? Put your answers or questions in the comments. I'll continue answering them after the live. Thank you so much for joining me.